Welcome to My True Health Podcast. I'm Michele Scarlet, a board certified functional medicine practitioner, functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, certified personal trainer, and women's health coach. I'm here to help women achieve true health by deep diving into the symptoms that often go ignored or dismissed. Join me and other experts in the women's health space as we uncover the truth around all things women's health. Hello, friends. Before we dive into today's episode, this is your friendly reminder to rate and review my podcast so more women like you get access to it. We know how important it is to empower and educate women to be advocates for their own health because the information we share on this podcast is not the information we're taught by our doctors.
Paula Reed is the founder of Paula Reed Wellness, where the primary focus is optimizing hormones, restoring gut health, and improving detoxification pathways. Paula has helped several hundred, primarily women, between her private practice and an integrative medical practice where she was the wellness provider for over 5 years. She is a certified functional diagnostic practitioner, nutrition practitioner, and is board certified in functional wellness, holistic health, and functional health coaching. In addition to her private practice, Paula serves as a clinical advisor for functional diagnostic nutrition. Welcome, Paula, to my podcast today. Thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Michele.
Yeah, this is going to be such an amazing conversation, something that I feel is just not talked about enough. I know we said that before we hit record. I just feel like many women enter perimenopause and menopause having no idea what to expect, or they just learn from what their mother's experience was, or their aunts perhaps. And it almost feels like a dreaded time. Like, you're over the hill. We all have this sort of negative context to what that's going to look like. And you're here to talk a little bit about that today.
I sure am.
All right. So tell us a little bit about your story and how you ended up specializing in optimizing hormones.
That could be a really long story, so I'm going to try and keep it as short as I possibly can. So I have, I guess you could say, 12 years experience being in menopause. I am 60 years old. I actually entered menopause at a fairly earlier age than what a lot of women do, somewhere between 47 and 48, basically. But literally, ever since I hit puberty, I've had some form of hormonal imbalance, from ovarian cysts to very painful periods to PCOS diagnoses, all the things, infertility, miscarriages, you name it. My hormones always seem to be working against me, honestly. So I guess that's just an area I'm very passionate about because of my personal experience. And then after getting into this wellness world and working primarily with women, I have found that there were a lot of women out there with similar stories, even worse stories. And it really boggles the mind when I think of the lack of awareness and education around that transition that women are naturally going to take from being premenopausal to perimenopausal, which can be 5 to 10 years or more,
Sure.
and then actually reaching menopause. What does it mean? How am I supposed to feel? All of those things. So between my personal experience and about 15 years professional experience working with women in this stage of life is just something I'm very passionate about.
Well, let me just tell you, you are a godsend to women because honestly, same women just they either just are not understanding it. I think even by definition, the women that I've worked with, they think when they say, "Oh, I'm in menopause," they think that they're kind of in the transition, but that's actually not true, correct?
Right. Actually, menopause is one day.
Okay.
One day. Menopause marks the 1 year mark, theoretically, since your last menstrual cycle. Every day beyond that, you're postmenopausal. And that's not widely understood either.
Yeah, I realized that in talking to some of my girlfriends and whatnot, they think, "Oh, I'm in menopause." And I'm like, hang on a second, like, because my definition is different, and it's exactly what you just said. So, can you give us sort of the definitions of like premenopausal, perimenopausal, menopause, and postmenopause?
Sure. So premenopausal is from the moment you experience your first menstrual cycle until the age range kind of varies. It can be anywhere, typically speaking, 35 to maybe early 40s, we talk about perimenopause. It's not super well defined, to be honest.
Okay.
But the signs that we typically look for are when your menstrual cycles are no longer as scheduled and consistent as they used to be. And there's actually a lot of misunderstanding around that too. I mean, it's fine if you're consistently 28-day cycle or consistently a 30-day cycle, or maybe you're a 35-day cycle. If it's consistent, that's okay.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what we typically consider premenopausal. You're still very fertile. You should have robust sex hormone production and have fairly consistent regular cycles. Earlier perimenopause, often we see the cycle length shortening, and I mean the length between cycles. Like it's very common for women to start saying, man, I used to be 28 to 30 days, and now it's like 26 days or 25 days. I've met women who are 21 to 23 days. I mean, that's literally having a period every 3 weeks almost.
Yeah,
So
that's too much.
exactly, exactly. So that's kind of a very common presentation in early perimenopause because of progesterone waning and estradiol kind of staying where it's at.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then as you progress in perimenopause, you're considered later stage perimenopause if you go 60 or more days in between your cycles. You automatically enter later perimenopause as soon as you go 60 days.
Oh,
All
that's
right.
so good to know. So good to understand because something we're going to touch on this in this conversation is the misdiagnosis of perimenopause.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so early perimenopause if your cycles are shortening, later perimenopause if you've gone 60 or more days between cycles. Okay, go on now.
Exactly.
Menopause.
Yeah. So it is more common in that later stage. And again, most women experience a perimenopausal phase that can last 5 years. It can last 10 years. In my particular case, and that's unique, but in my case, I was considered perimenopausal in my late 20s. I did not cease having periods completely until somewhere between 47, 48. So that was a 20-year state of chaos for me. Okay. That's not common, but it can happen. So I think it's important, worth mentioning when we talk about statistics in like 5 to 10 years, it may be 15 years for you. It was literally 20 for me, but that's not common. But in the later stage of perimenopause, usually you're going to go longer and longer. You'll hear women say, I didn't have a period for 4 months and then I had one again. Or, that's exactly what I did for like the last 2 years. I would go 4 to 6 months and then 8 months, and then suddenly it stopped. But I also think it's important, especially if you're in your 40s and you suddenly stop having periods, that does not necessarily mean menopause. You may just have another issue, medical, hormonal, whatever, that you're not having regular periods, but that alone does not necessarily equal menopause. But that's how
Yeah,
it's usually
sorry.
diagnosed.
That's what I wanted to ask, just as you said, like, so late 20s. If you weren't in functional medicine at that time.
No, not yet, unfortunately. I wish I had
So,
been.
yeah, if you look back, would you have considered yourself perimenopause or would you have considered yourself just maybe some hormone issues that maybe you could have, addressed with herbs or you could have addressed with stress management or, that kind of thing, and pushed
Yeah.
the symptoms of perimenopause to a more appropriate age.
Exactly. If I had been invested in like functional and integrative medicine at that time, I'm actually convinced I probably could have had normal periods. Maybe I wouldn't have had all the ovarian cysts and all the issues that I had. I was diagnosed perimenopausal at that age because of all the symptoms I presented. I had very irregular cycles. I had very painful cycles. My hormones were all over the place. Yes, they were being tested, but it just wasn't normal for
Mm.
someone my age, especially. So, what exactly caused that? Who knows? I mean,
Hmm.
again, it literally happened since the moment that I hit puberty. Nothing was ever exactly right there. So,
Right.
who knows? I mean, maybe it was a genetic thing, whatever. But no, when I see someone that age today or in their 30s or even early 40s, and they're like, I'm going 6 months without a period, I am not going to assume, oh, you're just going into early menopause. We want to investigate all the areas to see what can we do to support your hormones naturally at this age so that things are more normal, if that makes sense.
Yes. Oh my goodness. It's amazing for me to hear that, and I hope that my listeners hear that and really take that into consideration and be advocates for their own health here, because so many women just assume 40 is the age and
Yep.
then things start changing and oh,
Yeah.
they're just in menopause. And I'm like you, like, no, 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 no. Hang on. Before we just jump into that some diagnosis where you're now on a completely different path in life,
Mhm.
let's like take a look at some other things that might be causing some irregular period or causing some symptoms like that. But I certainly wouldn't jump to perimenopause either in the early 40s.
No, but I hear it all the time. I recently had a conversation with someone who became a client who she stopped having periods at 43 and said, well, my doctor just said I went into early menopause. That was so heartbreaking to me because you really, it can happen. There is such a thing as premature ovarian failure, and
Sure.
that can happen, but that is diagnosable. And unless you actually do the work to diagnose that, you shouldn't just assume anything.
Right.
And we discovered she had a significant mold issue. She had a couple mycotoxins, especially that are endocrine disruptors.
Yes.
That was the problem. That is fixable. That
Yes.
is totally fixable. But, conventional doctors aren't taught that. So they're not going to investigate that. And they aren't even looking at some of the other clues, like truly investigating it. And I don't know what all of the diagnostic tests are for that. But there is a medical condition, like I said, premature ovarian failure. That can happen in the early 40s, but that is not common. It is
Right.
not typical.
Right. Yeah, there are other factors that play a role. I mean, our world is so toxic, right?
Absolutely.
It's
Absolutely.
everything, our cleaning products, our beauty products, our shampoo, the air we breathe, the water we drink, like it's
Mhm.
never ending, and it certainly has its effects. Like we on our hormones, like people can seem to accept that in their 30s, they can seem to accept that in their 20s and then, try to find an alternate route to balance that or to fix that. But then
Right.
it's like we all have this sort of random thing like, oh, 40, it's done.
Yep, yep, just downhill from here. And it
Yeah,
doesn't have to be. It doesn't have to be. Now, there are legitimate cases of true perimenopause in the 40s, and they're having the symptoms that correlate with that. We've done the investigative work. We're looked at all
right.
the other things that could be the possibilities. But like especially women who reach puberty at an earlier age, like, I was 11, you
Mm,
likely are going to transition into perimenopause at an earlier age just
sure.
because we're only born with so many eggs. So
Sure.
it's only going to last for so many years. So it is still a very possible thing. But I think it's important to be aware of that transition, how you're expected to feel, and then understand that, like I said, true menopause is one day.
Yeah.
It marks the 1 year cessation of your period in a real circumstance of that, where, okay, this was just a natural transition. Or there is such a thing as surgical menopause. I should briefly mention that too. If you have to have a total hysterectomy, meaning not just your uterus, but both of your ovaries are removed, you are thrown into menopause overnight from that. That's not a natural transition. That's a surgical transition, but that is a real thing too.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So that is menopause that day. And then every day after that, you are postmenopausal.
Okay, well, thank you for defining that because I think that that is really important. And like you said, I don't think conventional doctors talk about that.
No.
Um, let's, I mean, I really want to dive into the misdiagnosis of that, but we are not here to talk about that. We are here to talk about this idea of menopause and postmenopause being this natural state. Yeah, like we all know we're going to get there. It's going to happen. We're not
Mhm.
going to outrun it. But it doesn't mean that it's actually an optimal state for women.
Exactly. Thank you for asking about that.
Yeah.
Um, because especially in the wellness world, you and I are both in the same kind of world here, and we always try and stress things that are natural for our bodies,
Mhm.
that this is what's going to be best. And while in a natural transition, not surgical menopause, but in a natural transition to menopause, it is viewed as, well, your ovaries and uterus have served their purpose. You're no longer having a monthly menstrual cycle. You are no longer fertile. You're not going to have children. So let the body do its thing. We shut down that production. You stop having periods and enjoy the rest of your life, ladies. But here's the thing. There is a reason that, and there are exceptions to every rule, but there is a reason that younger women are typically not being diagnosed with things like Alzheimer's, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, the dementia, just all of these things. It can certainly happen, but generally speaking, younger women are not diagnosed with those things. I think it's also accepted that when we look at the risk of things like heart disease, as an example, men, because of just genetics and the difference in our genders, men have a higher risk of like heart disease than women until women reach the age of 55 to 60, where we catch up and surpass men in that risk. So then you have to ask yourself, why is that? Well, the typical age of menopause for women around the world is age 51. That's the typical average age. So by the time you're 55 to 60, you've been in a hormone deficient stage for a few years. That is why women catch up to and surpass men in the risk of heart disease and all the various forms of dementia in this stage of life. Our estradiol, which is our primary estrogen, and progesterone are our two primary sex hormones. Yes, testosterone plays a role. It is important for women too, but our superpowers are truly estradiol and progesterone. There are 4,000 gene products and 400 physiologic processes in the body that depend upon robust levels of estradiol and progesterone to protect our health. So when we lose those hormones, our health is no longer protected.
Oh my goodness. I'm a big believer that you just don't mess with Mother Nature because Mother Nature doesn't make mistakes, but this sounds like a mistake.
I don't know that it's a mistake, but maybe it is a warning. I don't know. Back when, I don't know if you've ever heard of like the Women's Health Initiative. It was the largest randomized study that was done. It started in 1998 by the National Institute of Health here in the US to actually determine, should we view menopause as a natural state of transition and a stage of life for women? A lot of feminist groups at the time were like, let women be. This is how we're supposed to be at this stage of life. Or should it be addressed as a hormone deficiency and managed like we do other hormone deficiencies, deficiency of thyroid hormone, deficiency of insulin hormone, deficiency of cortisol hormone? So the study, I think, was great as far as what the intention was of the study. The methodology was flawed, and I won't get into all of that. The wrong form of hormones were used, synthetic hormones, which are not the same thing as the hormones that we produce naturally, or when we refer to bioidentical hormones. Okay. So the study's intention was good. The methodology was flawed. And then it caused more confusion about, well, are hormones good for us or not? But the whole intention was to study was, if we supplement estradiol and progesterone in women, can we prevent cardiovascular disease? Can we prevent osteoporosis? Can we prevent dementia, cancer, all of these things? So again, the intention was great. The methodology was flawed, and that's just caused a debate for decades about the safety and efficacy of hormones.
Yeah, I remember years ago, and tell me if I'm getting this wrong because it was something I would have heard as a child and maybe not understood. Suzanne Summers.
Yes.
She was one of the first, I think, to come out saying her hormone replacement therapy caused her cancer.
Oh, I wasn't aware that she said that, to be honest. And that may be what she said. Yeah.
You know what? I should fact check that. So just for anybody listening, maybe not 100% true. Again, a childhood, maybe my mom going through menopause. And so this is, what I picked up on. But I want to say that part of the reason my mom didn't do hormone replacement therapy was because it was really big at the time, maybe the late 90s, that synthetic hormone was causing inflammation, which actually increased risk of all of the things they were trying to prevent. But if you think about that, the pill or birth control, IUDs, the pill, they are all a version of synthetic hormone, and the risks on their labels are all exactly that.
Exactly. That is what's so confusing about this. Yeah, they actually had to end the clinical trials early because of all the preliminary data that came out of them saying, oh my God, the women that were giving the synthetic hormones to, both the estrogen and the progesterone, it was increasing risk of breast cancer and heart disease. And they discontinued the study early. It was supposed to last 8 years. They cut it off at 5.5 years. And then there was another arm of the study. Another thing that drives me crazy, there's this general belief in conventional medical wisdom that says if you don't have a uterus, you don't need progesterone. That's not true. But in the study, they were only giving a synthetic estrogen without any form of progesterone in place. And this was increasing the risk of blood clots. So women were getting strokes and heart attacks from increased blood clots. All of those risks, you're absolutely right, are the same risks with oral contraceptives.
Right.
And yet they're prescribed readily in this country and yours, because I know you're in Canada and I'm
Yeah.
in the US. They are prescribed readily, including for postmenopausal women as hormone therapy. I think we learned our lesson, or we should have learned our lesson with that WHI study and the clinical trials. Synthetic hormones increase the risk. They do not diminish the risk. But I want to tell you just a few statistics. I have them here. I didn't want to misstate them. With bioidentical hormone therapy, though, what all of the latest research is telling us, and just for folks who may not know what bioidentical means, it means completely identical to what our bodies naturally produce. They're plant-derived hormones that have been processed to match our body's natural endogenous produced hormones. So bioidentical hormone replacement therapy reduces the risk of osteoporosis by 26 to 37%, diabetes by 30%, coronary heart disease by 50%. This is the #1 killer of women around the world, except for Canada. It's #2 for Canadian women, but it's #1 in all the other industrialized nations around the world. Heart disease, not cancer, but heart disease. And bioidentical hormone therapy can reduce the risk by 50%. Dementia by 22 to 32%, age-related macular degeneration by 35%, depression by 50%, and all-cause mortality, meaning all of the killers of women combined, by 30%.
Holy. So, kind of coming full circle, even though menopause, postmenopause is natural, we are all going to get there. It is not optimal. And there are ways that we can make it optimal.
Absolutely.
Did you say something like 400, please correct me, 400 different
Physiologic.
functions?
Yes, physiologic processes with our brain, our hearts, our bones, our immune system, our ability to process carbohydrates efficiently and not develop insulin resistance. When we look at the statistics of like women who typically develop insulin resistance, type 2 diabetes, it can happen in younger women. Again, I'm not saying it never happens, but if you look at the statistics, younger women are not as prone. And quite frankly, they don't always have the healthiest habits, but it's the robust sex hormone production that's helping to protect the body. So as we age and we lose that production of sex hormones, can we just say, let the body take its course and accept the fact that we are eventually going to develop a lot of these diseases of aging, which, okay, I mean, it's not that we're supposed to be superhuman when we're 90 years old. I'm not trying to promote that, but I also want to have a good quality of life in the years to come. I'm 60 years old now. I would like to live as long as I can and still travel the world with my husband and do all the things, go hiking without having to sit down every 5 minutes. So if optimizing my hormones helps me do that, that's what I want. So.
Absolutely. And if you posed it that way to any woman, of any age, I'm sure the answer would be that is what I want as well. But it's just so interesting that women don't know, they don't ask, they're not told,
Right.
and it's pretty sad because majority of the women that I work with are either sort of entering perimenopause or are postmenopause. And I work with women generally who struggle with fat loss. But like you immediately just said, the risk of women who are postmenopausal developing insulin resistance, like immediately my brain went, weight gain.
Aha.
Yeah. Aha.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so interesting. And so, like, really, you don't have to struggle with all of the symptoms of menopause that come
No,
along with your hormones being, I don't want to say suppressed because they're not suppressed anymore. They just don't,
they're just gone.
they're just
They're
gone,
just
right?
gone. Exactly. I do want to quickly mention something though, because you brought up the thing like with Suzanne Summers and the breast cancer. And
Mhm.
I think this is a number one concern for a lot of women. When you hear hormones, they think breast cancer.
Mhm.
And that is a very, very valid concern, but I think there's a lot of misunderstanding around that too. So one thing I want to mention is again, statistically speaking, the number of breast cancer cases diagnosed, only about 5 to 10% have to do with the actual genetics, like BRCA1, BRCA2. Those are the more, I guess, commonly known about genes. And there are other genetics that can be risk factors. Those are very real risk factors.
Sure.
But only 5 to 10% of breast cancers diagnosed have anything to do with those particular genes. The other 70 to 80% have to do with hormonal factors. Well, what does that mean? A lot of different things, but about 30 to 40% of those are directly influenced by our diet and lifestyle choices, how our body is metabolizing estrogen. So it's not just about, oh my gosh, if I supplement with estrogen, I'm going to get breast cancer. If that were the case, that estrogen alone gave you breast cancer, we would all have breast cancer because
Mhm.
we're all born with it. Men have it too.
Yes.
So it's not just estrogen, but how is your body metabolizing it? What do your genes look like? That is important. But what are your diet and lifestyle habits? Because I'm not trying to lay blame on anyone. I would never do that. Breast cancer is a horrible disease. Any cancer is a horrible disease.
Sure.
But women don't know what they don't know. And they don't know that that nightly glass of wine at night is influencing how their body metabolizes estrogen, and that this can increase the risk of breast cancer, whether they're supplementing with hormones or not. Statistically speaking, more women are diagnosed with breast cancer after age 50. What does that tell you?
Right.
Yeah, it's not the hormone level, it's all the other factors combined. Cancer is complex, so I'm not trying to make light
Absolutely.
of it. Very complex, but it's not just supplementing with a hormone that will give you breast cancer.
Yeah. I did read that I know a lot of people think that cancer is mostly genetic, but I
Mhm.
did read that something like 80% of cancers are considered epigenetic in cause
Exactly.
and no longer a genetic factor to that extent.
Exactly. There are certain genetic factors that
Sure.
definitely increase your risk, but it's a very small percentage in relation to the number of cancer diagnoses made.
Yeah. I did also read that it's like 50%, 1 in 2 women will have a diagnosis of breast cancer at this, like in our world today.
Okay, because I think the last statistic I saw was like your chance of breast cancer is like 1 in every 40 women.
Oh, okay. Yours much
Um,
higher than mine. Maybe I misread.
yeah, I'm not, I mean, that's just something that I saw recently. But again, it's not just about our hormones. It's
Yes.
about all the environmental toxins, how we treat our bodies overall, which is why I love the work that we do, Michelle, because looking at all of these areas of investigation, do you have a healthy gut microbiome? What are your detox and drainage pathways looking like? Like
Yes.
that was something that was very, very important to me starting hormone therapy. I've been on hormones for 12 years because I know I'm a poor detoxer. So I continually do things to support my body's detox pathways to keep myself healthy on hormone therapy. I mean, it's what keeps you healthy anyway, but there are considerations if you're going to do hormone therapy. I think it's very important to be aware of these things, test regularly, and do all the things to support your body for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that there are some really easy things that people can do in terms of lifestyle as well. And I just want to mention them because I think that they're really important. And um, your circadian rhythm, for
Mhm.
one. So, we naturally, as humans, rise and set with the sun.
Mhm.
Our circadian rhythm does, the way our cortisol rises and then declines, and then our melatonin rises so you can sleep and whatnot. If you're constantly pushing your body outside of that natural rhythm,
Mhm.
Your detoxification processes change. Like it's also in the morning, our digestive system wakes up and it starts moving. And most adults, if you are metabolically healthy, are having a proper bowel movement every morning.
Mhm.
And if you keep pushing your time off, and now
Mhm.
you're pushing your detoxification systems off or your digestive system off, or if you're, fasting all day long. I know somebody who fasts till 8 p.m. at night.
Whew.
And I just, you know, I've told them, whatever, not my monkey, not my circus. But, if you keep pushing your natural rhythms off as
Mhm.
well, what else is happening? What other systems are being put off, including your ability to detox your hormones properly?
Absolutely.
Right? Becoming more and more susceptible to the things that are natural in our environment. So, for instance, mold. Now, living in a house full of mold, no, that's not something that most people want to
No.
have, but mold does exist in our environment. And if we are robust and we have a good immune system and we are healthy individuals, then living with mold, not in your house necessarily, but in our world, shouldn't have a huge effect like you and I see people with
Mhm.
mold illness all the
Right.
time.
Right. Absolutely.
Right. So, like, there are just things. So, for instance, so circadian rhythm. So, you had mentioned that glass of wine that you have at night. And lots of people, so lots of women that I work with don't actually have that glass of wine because they have become aware of that.
Right.
But their circadian rhythm's off or their stress management.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? They are incapable of living in their parasympathetic nervous system or even understanding the difference between our sympathetic and our parasympathetic nervous system
Mhm.
and learning to dial in the calmness of your body so that things like your liver have an opportunity to work optimally. Again, detoxification, detoxing that excess estrogen. If we're not able to do that, our metabolic processes slow down drastically.
Mhm.
And we
Absolutely.
allow ourselves the terrain or we give ourselves the terrain for disease.
Mhm.
So guys, if you're worried about this and you don't maybe have the means to dig deeper, like start with the things that are free. Start
Yep.
working, get your sleep together, focus on your stress. These things are crucial and in my experience, sometimes even more crucial. You can throw supplements at people all day long, but if they don't have the foundations in place,
Mhm.
you don't move the needle much.
That was perfect because I agree wholeheartedly. Because even though like I'm passionate about bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, it's going to work more effectively in a body that can receive it because there's a healthy gut microbiome, because there's a
Yes.
healthy HPA axis, because you're doing all of the other things. Hormones are not a magic pill either.
No.
They can be magical in the right body,
Yeah.
but that's why I believe in doing everything you just talked about even before considering hormone therapy. If you're at that stage of life where you're looking at it, you want everything else to be in place as well. I absolutely wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes I talk to my women about the foundations, like, being three-quarters of the process,
Yes,
right?
agree. I agree.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about bioidentical hormones very specifically. You had mentioned the difference briefly. Synthetic is something that we have created. It is not chemically exactly the same as what our body produces, but
Mhm.
bioidentical hormones is.
Yeah.
So if somebody is going to their doctor, they are perimenopausal or they are postmenopause, and they are looking for some help in terms of hormone replacement therapy, how do they know what their doctor is giving them? Um, because in all honesty, I think it's hard to get in Canada, but I haven't been there yet, so I don't know for sure. Um, and how do you ask your doctor for it? And how do you say no if your doctor wants to give you synthetic or won't? Again, I don't know the process, but won't push you to see somebody who will give you bioidentical versus synthetic. How do you navigate that?
Whew, yeah, that's a lot. So it can vary depending upon where you are in the world, you know. So there are even some differences between like the US and Canada and even throughout Europe. It drives me crazy, but that's just the fact. And even throughout the US, it's going to vary depending upon where you are in the US, what kind of medical care is available. So first of all, you know, the thing about synthetic hormones versus the bioidentical, the, the primary like synthetic hormone, like the one that was used in the trial, is called Premarin, by the way.
Okay.
Premarin is a word formed from pregnant mare's urine, because that is where Premarin was derived from. Yes, horse urine.
Okay.
And a really, I know, but a really important distinction is horses create 21 different kinds of estrogen. Humans create 3.
Right.
Estradiol, estrone, estriol. So first of all, it's kind of crazy to assume that a woman's body is going to respond appropriately to 18 other forms of estrogen that we don't even create. All right.
Right.
But when you take synthetic hormones, it does, if you're still producing hormones, it will suppress your natural endogenous hormone production. And it depends on whether you're taking an estrogen only or combined with progesterone, which synthetics are called progestin, by the way. But it's meant to suppress hormone production because that's how it works as birth control.
Right.
It's preventing ovulation. It thins the lining of the uterus, and it also makes the cervical fluid more hostile towards sperm. So that's all the different ways in which those synthetic hormones can prevent pregnancy. Okay, very effective for that, but in no way, shape, or form supporting a woman's body and hormone signaling. So I just wanted to mention that. But here's the sad thing. When you see a doctor, no matter where you are in the world, they'll often use the term progestogen. And progestogen can mean a synthetic progestin or a bioidentical progesterone. So I always say, if your doctor says progestogen, say, what do you mean? Do you mean bioidentical progesterone or synthetic, because I don't want synthetic? Now, honestly, I don't think a lot of doctors truly understand the difference, and not because they're dumb. They're just not taught this. This is not really taught in medical school or during their internships or residency, unless that's an area they're specializing in. So I just don't think they always understand the difference between those either. But if the term progestogen is used, you always have to ask, what do you mean? What are you prescribing, synthetic or natural? And believe it or not, at least in the US, and I swear I thought this was true for Canada as well, there are commercial pharmaceutical options for both bioidentical estradiol and bioidentical progesterone. In the US, the brand for progesterone is called Prometrium, and it is a bioidentical progesterone. It is available. Your primary care physician can prescribe it, or your OBGYN. The only women that really need to be wary about like Prometrium are those that have an allergy to peanut oil, because it's suspended in peanut oil. So if you have an allergy to peanuts, you can't do that one. You would need to use compounded, but that is available. There are even progesterone injections available through commercial pharmacies. Not all doctors may be aware of that, but it is available. And as far as estrogen, there is oral estrogen available. I always say avoid oral estrogen. Quick lesson on that. Even oral estradiol will convert to estrone when it goes through digestion and first pass metabolism in the liver. That is a more inflammatory estrogen that will increase your risk of blood clots, heart attack, stroke, all the bad things. Don't do oral estrogen, period, please. I'm begging you.
Good to know. Good to know.
But transdermal estrogen, whether it's creams or gels or patches or injectable estrogen, is perfectly acceptable and can be prescribed via conventional pharmaceutical options. So you don't have to go to a compounding pharmacy necessarily to get those options. And those can be great places to start. One bad thing is you don't have control of some of the excipients used in the formula. So, can there be an issue like with the peanuts, the peanut oil and Prometrium? There's also more limited dosing options, but it can still be a place to start. And then we have the compounded options, which can be more tailored. You have control over the excipients. There's many different options available for the methods of delivery as well. So there are choices depending upon where you are in the world. Everyone should have availability to bioidentical hormones. It's just if you can't get compounded hormones, you're going to have more limited options as far as dosing and methods of delivery.
Okay, interesting. So, you need a licensed professional. So, a doctor needs to prescribe them.
Yes, yes.
Okay. Could a functional medicine doctor or a naturopathic doctor prescribe them?
As long as they're licensed. Naturopathic doctors, some are licensed, some are not.
Yes.
I see a naturopathic doctor here in Tucson who prescribes compounded bioidentical hormones for me. I also get a compounded thyroid medicine from her. I like the compounded. I like to have control over the ingredients and being able to tweak the dosages. So I'm lucky that way. I have someone local that I can work with, and she is a licensed naturopathic doctor. So yes.
Okay, so I'm just going to pin this for a second because I do want to ask. You have a advanced course coming up.
Yes.
And I know you didn't put this in the form that you sent, but I do want to just ask you if there are people listening to this podcast, or if there are women that I come, in contact with that are looking for this kind of thing or more information, is this advanced course directed toward people like me who already have a designation? I'm an FDN, or could somebody who is just interested in knowing their options when it comes to postmenopause join and learn about it?
So it's going to be released as one of the advanced courses that FDN offers, and all of the advanced courses are available to anyone who wants to purchase them. Is it primarily directed towards practitioners like us so that we have familiarity with all of this? Although most FDNs are not licensed, so we can't prescribe. In the US, there are some over-the-counter options. They're not available in Canada, I know. In the US, there are some over-the-counter options available, and I do talk through some of the options for that if someone wants to start with that. But there are certain situations in which I'm always going to say you need to meet with a licensed provider who can do, like risk benefit analysis or prescribe stronger doses. It may be more cost effective to do that.
Okay.
But yes, to answer your question, my understanding is anyone can purchase the advanced courses that FDN offers. So yeah, if
Okay.
they just want to learn about it, they can.
Yeah, I mean, I would be interested in taking the advanced course for myself and for my clients, but I'm just wondering if it is worth people, doing the research for themselves, just becoming advocates for their own health. And my next question, now going back into our conversation, is if I were to go to my doctor and say, okay, I'm now postmenopause, it's clear I've not had a period for 13 months and I'm here. I am looking to optimize my hormones because of all of the processes and I want to reduce my risk, and I go in with all the information and I say, but I don't want to take synthetic hormones. Can you please prescribe me bioidentical hormones? And what if she says, oh, I don't have access to that, or no?
I would find another doctor.
Okay. No, that
Um,
means good advice. Don't
yeah,
just take
yeah.
it.
Absolutely. There are a multitude of online telehealth services around the world now being offered now. I can't speak on the validity of all of them, but I have been trying to do my research on these because some of them will offer hormones based only on your symptoms. Because again, in conventional medicine, it's called menopause hormone therapy. And it's meant to address vasomotor symptoms only, the lowest dose that's the most effective for addressing symptoms, not looking at levels, not looking at the rest of the health benefits, but just trying to get the hot flashes to go away, for example. Not to say that that's not important, but that's not the only thing that I think is worth looking at. But um, they're only just going to say, oh, well, if you have these symptoms, I'll prescribe you hormones. They're not going to check levels, nothing like that. They're just going to base it on how you're feeling. But by the time you turn 65, they're going to recommend you come off of them. That's just what they do. That's just kind of the general conventional wisdom. There's no reason to continue with hormones after age 65 because you shouldn't have those symptoms anymore. You've been in menopause long enough that you don't have the vasomotor symptoms. Well, if you stop the hormones, you are going to get the symptoms again, but it may be short-lived. That's a whole nother thing. But in integrative or functional medicine, we talk about bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, not just menopause hormone therapy. We're looking at the rest of the health benefits, all those other statistics that I talked to you about. Testing is important. Any doctor who tells you you can't test hormones or it's not important, you need to find another doctor because they really don't know what they're talking about. Following those levels is important so that you can reach a therapeutic range of the sex hormones to get all those benefits we talked about. You may be able to take very low dose hormones just to address hot flashes or a little bit of low libido or sleep, But if you really want it for the health benefits, you need to achieve certain levels, and you're not going to be able to tell that by symptoms alone.
Mm-hmm.
You have to test.
Mm-hmm.
So I really encourage working with practitioners who will test to some degree
Yeah.
and prescribe accordingly based on how you feel and how your hormone levels look. Both are important.
If you were 60 or 65 or whatever, at any age post menopause, and you start to supplement with bioidentical hormones, would you start cycling again? Would you start having a period again?
Great question. It depends on how you do it. So there are providers that promote something like the Wiley protocol, or what is just called rhythmic cyclical dosing. And by doing that, the earlier you start, you will have a withdrawal bleed, similar to what women do on oral contraceptives when they skip the pills for 1 month or for 1 week, or they just take the little sugar pills. You're having a withdrawal bleed. It's not a real menstrual cycle because you haven't ovulated, but
Right.
it's a withdrawal bleed that actually keeps a very healthy uterine lining. So
Yes.
it's not a bad strategy. It's not what a lot of postmenopausal women want, because if, speaking as a postmenopausal woman, the only thing you look forward to is not dealing with a monthly period
Sure.
anymore. But from the standpoint of health, it is actually a pretty safe thing to do. But if you take progesterone consistently, that will not produce a withdrawal bleed, but you can have unexpected, unplanned shedding. Sometimes it's light, but it can happen because if you take progesterone all the time at a high enough dose to balance with your estradiol, sometimes your lining is just going to want to shed. So it's unplanned at that point, but it can happen.
So interesting. I'm just like so curious to know that, at 65, I could still potentially be having a regular cycle,
Yeah.
even though it's a withdrawal bleed, but just like continuing on
Yes.
about my world. So it's interesting. I haven't been on birth control for a very long time, and I only ever was on it for a few months, realized it was not for me, and then never went back on it. But and my periods are, thank goodness, knock on wood, have never been bad. They're not something that inconvenience me even in the slightest. Again, thank goodness. I know there are so many women out there that struggle in that way, but I feel like for me that would just be like great. I can like, I'm not going to say bypass, but if you can get your bioidentical hormones to the proper therapeutic level that allow you to cycle normally and not have the hot flashes, not have the insomnia, not have all of that, you're like, you could just ride into your, into the sunset feeling really good.
That's exactly what the whole idea is. If you approach it from that standpoint,
Yeah,
all right, none of us necessarily enjoy having some form of a monthly bleed, or in postmenopause, it may not happen every single solitary month,
sure.
but that is kind of the idea behind it. A healthy shedding of the lining because you've been taking progesterone to build it, which is
Mhm.
what it's supposed to do. And this is what keeps you healthy. But yeah, it's just like continuing on into the sunset, like you said, as if you were still in your even though you're in your 60s, 70s, and beyond. I mean, I plan on staying on hormones until they pry them out of my hands. And
Yeah,
maybe by the time I'm 85, I won't care.
sure.
But right now, I feel better, honest to God. I feel better today at 60 than I did in my early 30s because of all the chaos that was going on with my hormones at that time. And that's kind of sad if
That
you
is
think
sad.
about
Yeah,
it.
but I'm happy you're feeling really good.
But yes, indeed.
Let's talk about hormone signaling and what that means, and how birth control, whether you are pre-menopause, so somebody who is cycling regularly, or if you've been prescribed some type of birth control in perimenopause and beyond, um, how that is interrupting our natural hormone signaling.
One really good example of that, let's talk about oral contraceptive because they are prescribed so frequently. But even if it's just a synthetic progestin only, like Mirena IUD, because really it's the progesterone that's the most important one here. You have to have sufficient true progesterone to have ovulation
Hmm.
and to actually have a real cycle, a real menstrual cycle. So when you have a synthetic progestin in place, it's telling the body, hey, you have progesterone already here, so you don't need to produce it. And that is what suppresses our natural endogenous production at that time. But then also you're not getting the signal from your body, oh, the lining has increased, because natural progesterone does that. Synthetic progestins do the exact opposite. They decrease the lining, so that even if, God forbid, you do ovulate on hormonal birth control, an embryo cannot implant if there's not a thick lining there. So it's just messing with what the body is supposed to be doing each month with the natural fluctuation of hormones. Because keep in mind, we produce estradiol, our primary estrogen, all month long, but we just have two peaks of that, one in the follicular phase and one in the luteal phase. Progesterone is truly only produced in the second half of the cycle.
Right.
And that's when we have that peak. So when you're taking synthetic hormones month long, you're also disrupting the natural ebb and flow of those natural hormones that also communicate with our brain and our heart and our bones and our mitochondria. So that's why women who are on those synthetic hormones are also more likely to start developing some of those health issues that we typically don't see until women are aging, like insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes and even heart conditions and things like that, and breast cancer.
Right.
I mean, there's a much higher risk of breast cancer with synthetic progestins than anything else. The other thing about progesterone is, it is our calming, and it's one of the things that is supposed to help keep us kind of happy and in a good place. But when you have a synthetic progestin in place, whether it's alone or like in an oral contraceptive where you have both synthetic hormones, this is also why there's a lot more like depression and anxiety among women who use hormonal birth control, because that signaling is lost with the brain and natural progesterone, because natural progesterone has now been suppressed.
Right. Wow. Honestly, I'm sure there are lots of women out there that would go, yeah, but I don't have a period, so it's fine. Like lots of women would be like, it controls my hot flashes, or I'm using it so that I don't get pregnant and I don't get, it's working for me. For me, that makes me feel like my body's not working. That makes me feel like I'm going to be paying for it later because I'm going to eventually come off of it and things are going to be really out of whack, and that doesn't feel good for somebody who also struggled with her own health at one point, and hormones played a big role in that too. And I just like never want to go back there, and the idea that I'm voluntarily taking something that puts me there just doesn't sit right at all.
Absolutely. And there are a ton of young women, especially like athletes, that are being told, well, take the birth control continuously so you don't have a withdrawal bleed. Then you don't have to worry about tampons and pads and cramps while you're competing or doing your thing. And I understand why women do that. I do, because they aren't being educated about what this really means for their body and how they're no longer receiving those communications from their body to let them know when something is wrong.
Right.
I mean, we should have a monthly bleed. It is a natural part of our anatomy to keep that part of our body healthy. And when you are suppressing that, things could be going wrong and you're not getting the signals. You don't know that you're not having a period because, of something wrong. You're just deliberately suppressing it. So there's just so many things that make us not be in touch with our bodies that we should be.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I'm sorry that, your period is a hassle every month or whatever, but it is like a real health check,
It is.
right?
It
And
is.
instead of just ignoring it and masking it, maybe it's time to face it.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly.
So another thing that is so interesting is that people, a lot, I shouldn't generalize, but women that I work with, women that I know, the idea of hormone replacement therapy, and you and I are talking about bioidentical, so I'll just stay on track with that. So bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. People get strange about wanting to take supplements, right? People think that, again, you had mentioned it. They think cancer.
Yeah.
They're taking hormones, they think cancer. Um, but then they have no problem with this idea of synthetic thyroid hormone if their thyroid isn't functioning the way that it should, or they have no problem with insulin if they end up being diagnosed with diabetes, which increase if your hormones are not where they should be post-menopause. What do you think that's about, and how can we change the mind of women and go, no, hang on a second, like you might actually prevent these two things and have to be on this synthetic thing by doing this.
I think it's just messaging. It's just messaging. And we have so many things coming at us between, and I mean, social media is huge now, as you know. So, it used to just be we saw what was being reported on the nightly news, and now no one really watches the nightly news. We're getting all of our information online. So there's so much mixed messaging and what is considered acceptable or not. And, I'm not here to tell anyone you should definitely do hormones because it is very nuanced. It is a personal decision. I'm very pro bioidentical hormone replacement therapy. I was a good candidate. Again, I've been doing it for 12 years. But that doesn't mean that it's right for every woman for whatever the reason. There can be complicated personal medical histories. There can be complicated medical histories, especially with like breast cancer and things like that. So not trying to make light of any of that. There are certain nuances, and it may not be for absolutely everyone for every reason. But when it's just viewed as, oh, well, I have hypothyroidism, so that's a diagnosis. Of course, I'm going to take my thyroid medication because it's been prescribed by a doctor and it's not considered controversial.
Right.
Or if you're type 1 diabetic, that is a diagnosis, and you're prescribed the only life-saving treatment we know, which is using insulin replacement. I mean, that is a hormone and you're being given that. But menopause and hormones in general are just so controversial, just so many different opinions. So I'm not surprised when women are confused because doctors are confused about it too. There are so many doctors that are like, I'm not going to prescribe hormones because I don't understand them. Well, at least they're not just willy-nilly writing prescriptions for things they don't understand.
Yeah.
I at least appreciate that.
Yeah.
But there are hormone specialists who can help a woman make a better informed decision based on her health history, her family health history, and what her goals are. Absolutely.
I think that's a really good message for women. Like, just ultimately, it's like finding the people who are going to support you in the best way. Ask the questions. If you're not sure about the questions, I mean, give one of us a call. If you're not sure what to ask, and, you know, just push. Like, push a little harder because you're right. Doctors don't say very often that they don't understand it, so it's not something they're going to navigate. I would
Right.
very much appreciate it if my doctor just said, "You know what? That's not my thing. I'm going to find somebody for you who can help you." That would go so much further, and I feel like I would respect that as well so much more than just, "Oh, yeah, 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 here, take this."
Yeah,
You know?
absolutely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
that's good message. Is there anything else today, Paula, that you want women to know about bioidentical hormones or menopause or postmenopause?
Is it all right if I mention a couple of books or resources
Absolutely.
for people to follow? So there's a great book that just recently went through a major rewrite. It's updated called Estrogen Matters. And I think it's a great read, written by a husband and wife team about, they talk even more in depth about like the study that I mentioned with Women's Health Initiative and some of the other studies that followed, and talking about all the reasons why estrogen really does matter for women and why we shouldn't just be afraid of it just because it's called estrogen, right?
Mhm.
There's another book called The Great Menopause Myth that just came out in September, written by a couple of mentors of mine, and really great book on especially like the rhythmic cycling dosing of hormones if you want to do that, but lots of other options as well. They go into the history of hormones and lots of options about bioidentical hormone therapy and the difference between synthetic. Dr. Sarah Gottfried has a book called Food, Women, and Hormones, I think is what it's called. Yeah, Food, Women, and Hormones, or Women, Food, and Hormones, something like that. But yeah, Dr. Gottfried. And she talks about the big picture as well. I just like her. I think she's got a lot of great information out there. Dr. Felice Gersh, you can find her on Instagram. She was the mentor for some of my mentors. I don't know how old she is. I'd say she's probably 60s or 70s now, but she talks a lot about all the things that I'm passionate about as well. So give her a follow on Instagram. She talks about all the benefits, but also what some of the risks are and the nuances and all of that. So those are some resources that I would point women towards if they just want to learn more about it, not just take one person's word for it, but do the research. I will say in that advanced course that will be released hopefully by the end of this month, I have 5 pages of research links. So
Wow.
people can go and look at the information. There's a lot of research links. So again, you're not just taking my word for it, but look at what the research says about the pros, the cons, the considerations, everything when it comes to bioidentical hormones.
Amazing. Okay. After we stop recording, I'm going to send you a text, Paula, and have you send me the names of those books and the authors, as well as the doctor you just mentioned to follow on Instagram. I'll make sure that's in the show notes for people to be able to grab. Paula, why don't you tell us where people can find you as well?
Paula Reed Wellness. I have a website, I'm on Facebook, and I'm on Instagram. Paula Reed
Perfect.
Wellness. Thank you.
Perfect. I'll make sure those are in the show notes as well. And thank you so much for coming on today, just for my own sake, my own curiosity about that stage of life. And I know it's going to be invaluable for the listeners of this podcast.
Well, thank you for inviting me. This is a topic I'm passionate about, so thank you for your time.
Thank you.
If you're looking for more information on how you can work with me, you can head to my website at www.michellescarlet.com or find me over on Instagram at michellescarlet_. And this information will also be provided in the show notes.